Let's go ahead and open up in a word of prayer. Our gracious God and Heavenly Father, thank you so much for bringing us all here tonight. Thank you for blessing the efforts that were put in by cast and crew of the Easter musical that happened this past weekend. Thank you for all that were able to hear the gospel. And Lord, I pray that those who are still wrestling with it, God, that you would speak to their hearts and draw them to yourself. Lord, I pray that you would bless this evening of study, and we thank you for who you are and everything you do, and we lift this all up in your holy name. Amen. Amen. All right, so I will be teaching out of Mark 10:32-52. It's not a long day at all. All right, it's been a couple of weeks too, so I kind of want to go over a quick recap on where we are, what we've been talking about. So first things first, we in these last few chapters, we're closing in on the last days, the very final days of Jesus' earthly ministry before his crucifixion. Right. And during this time, we are seeing Jesus repeatedly portraying the heart of his mission to his disciples, and they miss it almost every time. They've seen, miraculous healings. They've seen God's provision. They've heard Jesus talk about true kingdom priorities. He's done it all, and they miss it. Combined with that, we're seeing this tension that has built up. Jesus has repeatedly, twice now, predicted his death, burial, and resurrection to his disciples. Now, I do want to pause here, I guess, and kind of give the disciples a moment of grace, because they don't accept it particularly well. But what would you do if your best friend boss said, I'm going to die tomorrow, but then I'm going to come back to life? Obviously, Christ is a little bit different, but it's certainly created tension. Essentially, there is this gap in what the kingdom of heaven is and what Jesus is teaching it to be, and what true priorities are, and what serving God actually looks like, and where the disciples are at. And during this time as well, the Pharisees, they've attempted to square up, take on Jesus, try to bring him down, find something to be able to just get rid of him. And they have failed each time. And then also, before we kind of break down into the passage and start reading itself, I kind of want to show you a breakdown of how I looked at it, how I'm going to divide it up for our time together. Taking it portion by portion, we have Jesus foretelling his death, request from the sons of Zebedee, the servant of all, true greatness, and then blind Bartimaeus healed. You might notice that these two sections are kind of put together in a lot of Bibles, under the same heading. But really, in my mind, I saw those as two separate scenes because of the actors, if you will, involved. And another call out, so last week, or not last week, but the last time we were together, we know that Jesus was at Bethany beyond the Jordan, which is, I want to kind of pull out to the map, Bethany east of the Jordan, that's here. And he's making his way into Jerusalem at this point, so you'll see the trek that way. But we're going to go ahead and dive into the passage. All right, can I have someone read verses 32-34 for me?
And they were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking ahead of them. And they were amazed, and those who followed were afraid. And taking the 12 again, he began to tell them what was to happen to him, saying, See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles. And they will mock him and spit on him and flog him and kill him. And after 3 days, he will rise.
All right, so we saw on the last map, the disciples are on their way to their final destination, city of Jerusalem, right? They've come from Bethany beyond the Jordan, which is exactly where Jesus was baptized, right? So he's coming to where everything really started. Now, the text notes a couple things in it, but the text notes the disciples were amazed and that those who followed were afraid. And I thought to myself, like, why would they be amazed? Like, why would they be afraid? They've seen a whole lot more than just Jesus walking in front of them. For those who had kind of started putting the pieces together mentally, they saw that Jesus walking ahead, moving forward, what he was doing was courageous. And even those who didn't understand, as Jesus is walking in front, there's a sense to this resoluteness to his demeanor, like a finality, right? He is on his way to Jerusalem, which is where the chief priests and the scribes and the elders are. He is basically walking right into danger. And for disciples, with that, like at that moment, they're starting to connect the dots. Next, we see Jesus predicts his death for the third time. And I'm going to kind of go back and read the prior two instances here. And each one is really with increasing detail. So in Mark 8:31-33, it reads, "And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he said this plainly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, 'Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man.'" Okay, so this is like the very first prediction, and it's jarring. Mark 9:30-32, when Jesus predicts his death again, it reads, "They went on from there and passed through Galilee, and he, Christ, did not want anyone to know, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, 'The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And when he is killed, after 3 days, he will rise.' But they did not understand the saying, and they were afraid to ask him," which, if one of your fellow disciples said, you heard, "Get behind me, Satan," you can kind of understand why. So for the reader and for the disciples, we've gone from something that's somewhat kind of vague. You hear that Jesus is going to suffer, he's going to be killed, and be rejected by the religious elite. He'll arrive 3 days later. So the first prediction is disruptive, right? The second prediction becomes more intense. We have the idea of Jesus being betrayed, or the idea of betrayal introduced. It's becoming more personal, right? The passage says that he is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And so in this last prediction, Jesus is, again, connecting those dots for his disciples about his mission and their journey, right? And this last prediction, he states who the offenders will be, which we've already seen, the religious elite, Pharisees, etc. The Gentiles were introduced at this point, right? That he would be delivered to them. And then Christ continues on in more graphic detail about the torture that he's going to go through. He'll be spit on, he'll be mocked, he'll be flogged and killed. And again, this really should have been a light bulb moment for the disciples. They were on their way to Jerusalem, and that's exactly where the betrayal would take place. Jesus is spelling out all of these things, right? So the disciples can clearly see the plan come together, but once again, they fail. Their spiritual vision is clouded. All right. So next section, and I put on my notes section, can we please read verses 35-41, someone?
Okay.
Thanks, Nick.
Where's it go to? Okay. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. What do you want me to do for you? He asked. They replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in glory. You do not know what you are asking, Jesus said. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared.
Thanks, Dan. All right, so let's walk through. All right, James and John, so Jesus just predicts his death, right? And so James and John decide to just go right into making their request with the help of their mommy. If you read in Matt 20:20-23, which is the parallel account, it reads, then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came up to him with her sons, and kneeling before him, she asked him for something. And he said to her, what do you want? She said to him, say that these two sons of mine are to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your kingdom. Jesus answered, you do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink? And they said to him, we are able. He said to them, you will drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left is not mine to grant. But it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father. Okay, so I am just mentally imagining James and John coming up and saying, like, all right, Mom, you gotta make the request for us. And I have this like mental image of like when I was in college, these kids would have their parents call into their academic advisor for assistance. Like that's kind of the gist. Now, obviously, the culture was very different. And in the Matthew account, you can see that Jesus goes right to James and John and says, are you able to drink the cup? And he doesn't even, it's almost like we don't see him directly respond to Mom there. And James and John essentially just went in with this, okay, like, you got to do this for us mentality. Like, and in some ways, just like the name it and claim it we see today. Like, God, I need you to do this thing for me. And notice that Jesus didn't like straight up turn them down either. Like, he had every right to say like, nope, I'm not going to listen. And it just gives insight into the grace and the mercy that God shows when we ask. It doesn't mean he's going to answer, but just the fact that he will put up with us. So the right and the left, right? These were two positions of power in the Messianic kingdom, obviously. Jesus just said he was going to give his life, and just like last time, so the second prediction, we had an argument immediately after about who was the greatest. We see James and John just miss the point entirely to chase after earthly things. And just something to keep in mind, right? This is the same James and John that saw Jesus in the Transfiguration. They are very much part of the inner circle. And somehow they're still not getting it. As a window into their personality, these are also the sons of Zebedee, are also called the sons of thunder, who in Luke 9 asked Jesus if they should call down fire on a Samaritan village that didn't welcome Jesus. So they had all the zeal, but they just dropped the ball on the meaning. They couldn't see clearly what Jesus' true mission was. All right. So then Jesus asks if they're able to drink the cup, the same cup, or be baptized with the same baptism. They say yes, right? They don't get that the cup and the baptism are costly. And interestingly enough, Jesus says, yes, absolutely, you will drink this cup. You will be baptized with the same baptism. But within the Godhead still gives, like, surrenders to God the Father. I need to pause and explain my meme here that I created with the help of ChatGPT. So, funnily enough, this is a spin-off of The Office, full disclosure, I've never, I think I've watched maybe 1 or 2 or 3 episodes of The Office. I really need to watch more. But I'm very aware of a lot of the themes, right? And one of the characters' names is Dwight Schrute. Dwight Schrute is very much he's kind of power hungry. He he's got the assistant regional manager thing going on, but really he's assistant to the regional manager. So I just pictured James and John, sons of Zebedee, as oh, we're the assistant to the global manager. We're big. We've got something going on. We're important. And ChatGPT came up with this, and it was just so. Anyway, on a not so lighthearted note, they do drink the cup that Jesus drank from. James becomes the first of the 12 to be murdered. And we read that in Acts 12. And then we have John. John, we know, this is, the disciple that Jesus loved. This is the John of the book of John and 1st, 2nd, 3rd John and of Revelation. He's sent into exile in Patmos. Some traditions also say that he survived being boiled in a vat of oil. Whether or not we know that for sure, really it doesn't matter. That's aside from the point. Exile is not, there's nothing comfortable about it. They truly did drink the cup. Despite all of this, despite all of their power hungry and missing the mark before Christ died, they don't realize that their reward is far greater than any earthly kingdom. I'm going to read right out of Revelation, the book that John himself wrote down. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more. The sun shall not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb in the midst of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will guide them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. And how much greater is that than just some position in a political office? And how amazing that God would still bless them with that. How amazing that God would still bless us with that. All right, so James and John have stirred things up, if you will. If I could have someone read verses 42 to 45 for me.
I'll read it.
Please, thank you.
42 to 45?
Yeah.
And Jesus called them to him and said to them, "You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many."
Awesome, thanks, Laura. All right, I will get to my meme in a moment because yes, they get distracting. So we've already said a bajillion times now, the disciples' priorities are still askew. So rather than anybody be concerned again about Jesus' prediction, they go right back to the same argument from chapter 9, almost with more detail. The other 10 now have a beef with James and John, sons of Zebedee. And it made me wonder, why do the disciples fall into this pattern? You think they would have learned the first time. You think we would learn the first time. And truly, we don't know. Did they understand that Jesus was really, truly going to die? I mean, the scripture, the scripture of the previous instance in Mark 9 kind of says that they didn't fully understand it. I don't know if they mean the death. We don't see anyone trying to correct Jesus. As far as we know, everyone kind of fell silent except for going right into this argument, right? So again, James and John are over here. They're asking for exact places of authority. They're not just saying I want to be the greatest in the kingdom. I need to be at your left and at your right. This is very specific. And it made me think about kids calling dibs on shotgun in the car, which I don't think is a thing as much anymore. Maybe it is. I know kids, because kids like, I know some parents are very conscientious about where kids sit to a certain age, but that's where this meme comes in. So it's like, when a kid is calling dibs, right? They want to be in power. They want to be in control of the music, of the air conditioner. They want to be able to turn around and make a face at their sibling, right? There's this like sense of power and control. And in reality, if that car is going to get hit, they are actually in more danger than someone in the backseat. In most cases, right? For a typical crash. And in this case, the car, as it were, metaphorically, in this case of wanting to be baptized with the same baptism, have the same cup, like following Jesus' footsteps. It's as if the car was literally guaranteed to get into an accident. And if you look at this picture, this dog is just like so smug. First of all, this is pure golden retriever, so smug that it's in the front seat, and the kid and the mom in the back. I'm guessing the kid and the mom are kind of salty about it, but like the reality is, as I said, they were probably safer in that back seat, but the dog was like, yes, I have been chosen. So we have this all going on. There's this conflict. Jesus brings the disciples back together, right? And he uses this as a teachable moment to once again emphasize that greatness in the kingdom is really, it's opposite of greatness in the world. And the two words here for servant and slave are two different words in Greek, right? We have diakonos, which I have, if you're interested in looking at Strong's Concordance, you can look that up there, and doulos. So intentionality, right? Diakonos is the first word used. If we think about it, it's very similar to our word deacon. We're familiar with what deacons do in the church. It indicates typically a position that is voluntary, Someone is actively choosing service. This person is executing the commands of another. And so Jesus is basically saying that the one who wants to truly be great has to actively choose to serve, has to be diakonos, parallel to what Christ did. He chose to serve. He chose to take on flesh. The second word here is doulos, which is bondservant or slave. And again, like, why use the different words? Doulos is someone who actually belongs to another. It's almost like an escalation from servant to slave, and I'll explain why, right? A doulos has no personal status. They're fully under the authority of someone else. They cannot seek out their own rights. They just do the will of the master. It can also describe someone who is willingly devoted to someone else. And in this case, obviously, we are willingly devoted to Christ. And then Jesus follows up that he is giving his life as a ransom for many, right? Why ransom? Like, why that particular terminology? He could say he just gave his life up for everyone. It's very intentional. A doulos, so a slave, could either be purchased, like in a marketplace, right? Or for a price, or they could submit themselves into debt slavery because they owed someone a debt, couldn't pay it back, didn't have the means, right? Either way, both of these paint a beautiful picture of our relationship to Christ. He truly paid the ransom for us. He bought us out of the marketplace of sin, of that slavery. And because he did that, he paid our ransom. We submit our lives because we owe a debt we could never pay him back. I mentioned Jesus was probably escalating here, right? Going from just serving to being a slave. And the reality is, being a slave of all, as we willingly submit to Christ, is super uncomfortable. especially when we're dealing with people, myself included, that I don't like. Yes, there are people I don't like. No one in this room, don't worry. You can laugh at that. It's usually family, but that's another story. But because we have been ransomed and purchased, our lives are not our own. Christ paid the ransom, and it is our acceptable sacrifice to submit to him and show our allegiance and service. All right. Last section. And again, did I put the verses? No. So if someone could please read 46 to 52 for me, that would be lovely.
Then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you." "Throw this cloak aside." He jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go," said Jesus, "your faith has healed you." And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road.
Thank you. All right, full disclosure, this is my favorite part of the whole passage because it's so rich, and I'm going to pull apart as much as I can for you without keeping us here super late, because we don't do that, as my son would say. So we have Jesus and his disciples. They've been traveling. They're, again, coming from Bethany beyond the Jordan, and the text says they arrive at Jericho, and then they're ready to leave Jericho. What the heck is going on? Might help to talk about the fact there are actually two Jerichos in the Bible, which would help kind of solve the, in one account Jesus was leaving Jericho, and the other account he's coming into Jericho. Which one was it? There was, and that's the account in Luke 18:35 to 43. Scholars say that these are definitely the same account. There was Old Testament Jericho and New Testament Jericho, and that's modern day Old Testament Jericho, if you will, also known as Tel Sultan, and this is a depiction of what Herod's New Testament Jericho would have been. At this point in time, Old Testament Jericho, so this is Joshua, the Battle of Jericho, Rahab, all of that, right? That's that same Jericho. It was a fortified Canaanite stronghold at one time. By this point, it was an archaeological mound. And interesting fact, it's actually a World Heritage Site. Interesting that a place in the Bible shows up as a World Heritage Site. How about that? Old Testament Jericho ended up being destroyed by the Babylonians. When the Persians arrived, they started to rebuild. Over time, Old Testament Jericho was just gradually abandoned because people went to a better settlement, which is New Testament Jericho. We have New Testament Jericho, City of Palms. It was this lush oasis. People there were wealthy. It was populated. Look at these pools. Like, I just want to go hang out there. It looks beautiful. Herod the Great. So this is Herod the Great. This is had built the city, this Roman city, just south of the ruins. We've had a lot of talk about different Herods. This is a different Herod from the one we've talked about and studied in Mark before. This is the Herod that killed the baby boys, that ordered baby boys be killed after Jesus was born. So he turned this area into something like a winter retreat for the elite and for the wealthy. So we have this super paranoid leader who was also building beautiful things. Bartimaeus was likely on the outside of the city, kind of on the outskirts, would have been a stark contrast, right? As he's on the edge of the city that looks beautiful. I think of it as like seeing a beggar in Paris, right? You have, or any other beautiful city. I happen to think Paris is beautiful. Notice I didn't mention New York City because New York City's not pretty, but I digress. Nothing wrong. The other piece of this is that because Herod built this, the area had significant Gentile influence. You can see that even just in Bartimaeus' name. Bar is a Jewish word, a Hebrew word meaning son of, and Timaeus was a Greek name. And so I went on a rabbit hole to figure out if Timaeus was actually Greek or if he was Jewish. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, but it was a rabbit hole. Bottom line is that there is significant Gentile influence. All right. So we have Bartimaeus introduced. They say, a man named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus. Well, now that you know his name means son of Timaeus, son of Timaeus. Why would Mark have done that twice? So it could be a couple of things, right? It's possible that Mark was trying to tell the reader that they could literally look for Bartimaeus and ask him himself about the account. Or it could very well be that he was just explaining like Jewish nomenclature to a Gentile audience, right? And so Bartimaeus is just kind of he's sitting there chilling, for lack of a better word, waiting, hoping that people who are traveling will see him, provide him with money, whatever. So he's sitting there and he hears this buzz. And he asks, what's going on? Like, hey, what gives? Why is it? What's happening? And so the people tell him, oh, it's Jesus of Nazareth. Basically naming him by his location. Oh yeah, there's that Jesus from Nazareth. And if you remember, Nazareth was kind of seen as like a rinky-dink, the word I'm looking for, like a small town, not really very important, right? Like almost like, whatever. And this blind man who is growing up in a heavily Greek influenced world straight up calls Jesus out, Son of David. He immediately recognized Christ as the Messiah. This blind, impoverished man who is sitting outside of the city, the very city where elite with prestige and power would have had access to all kinds of education and knowledge and tools necessary to identify who he was. Well, the people are mad and they tell him to be quiet. Just be quiet. Despite that, Bartimaeus cries out again for Jesus, which very much reminds me of the persistent widow. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the book off the top of my head at the moment, but the persistent widow had gone in every day for justice. Just like in that same vein, Bartimaeus was calling out again, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. He made the connection that Jesus was the promised Messiah. This is where it gets good. It actually almost good, but all right. And as you can guess, this is fiction of Bartimaeus. So after calling out for Jesus twice, Jesus actually calls for Bartimaeus to come see him. And the people tell him, oh, Bartimaeus, you can go see Jesus. And in response, Bartimaeus throws off his cloak and runs to Jesus. That's a detail we can really gloss over today without understanding the context. In that culture, a cloak, especially for someone like Bartimaeus, it was not just clothing. It was warmth. It was their shelter. It's how they stayed warm with like a blanket at night. It was their identity marker. His cloak likely functioned as something he sat on. Maybe that's where he had his money like collected, spread out, and it was really possibly his only possession of value. Just a way to think of it, it's his workspace, his security, his coverage. Right. In throwing off his cloak, he abandons his very means of survival, right? Throwing it off. I'm not coming back to this. And he doesn't just put it aside, carefully fold it, bring it with him, anything like that. He throws it and goes right to Jesus. Immediate, decisive, unhesitating. We see Bartimaeus' faith is already in action. He hasn't been healed yet. Does he even know if he's going to get healed? Maybe, maybe not. But he's already acting like, I don't need this anymore. So in contrast to the two disciples who just said to Jesus, like, do whatever we ask of you, this man, Bartimaeus, he has Jesus ask him, what do you want me to do for you? I mean, obviously Jesus knows. Perhaps the crowd would have put two and two together. But it's this posture of humility that we see. And Bartimaeus says, Rabbi, or in some translations it says, Rabboni is the actual word, that I may receive my sight. Rabboni is the more personal form of rabbi. It means my master or my Lord. And interestingly, there are only two people recorded in the Gospels to call Jesus this. We have Bartimaeus here, and we have Mary Magdalene when her eyes are open and she sees the risen Christ. Bartimaeus can't even see physically, and his spiritual sight is 20/20. So Jesus acknowledges the man's faith, restores his sight, and tells him to go on his way. And I thought it was interesting that there was no laying of hands or anything like that we've grown accustomed to seeing, or like digging down in mud, nothing, just verbal acknowledgement of his faith. So Jesus tells him to go his way. Immediately Bartimaeus sees. And after being told to go on his way, it says that Bartimaeus follows Jesus. He takes on Jesus' way. The last piece that I was looking at with this, Bartimaeus is actually the only man named as someone healed in the Synoptic Gospels. Right? When I came across this fact, I'm like, no, I need to dig. Like, I need to be really sure about this, because this is kind of high stakes, because somebody's going to go back and look. Or I will. This blind man, like, why name him? Why name Bartimaeus? Of all of the different healings, like, wouldn't someone being risen from the dead kind of be a little bit more like of a bam kind of moment? This blind man had better spiritual sight, and Christ gave him the physical sight to match. And maybe that's why. The Lord knows. But Bartimaeus is an example for us of how we follow Christ, because Bartimaeus saw Jesus clearly for who he was. He responded in faith. And to kind of wrap up my lesson here, I thought of Hebrews 12, 1-2. And this down here I'm sorry if people don't like ChatGPT, but it has some really good uses. I asked it to make me a picture of Bartimaeus throwing off his cloak. That's what this is. And could I just ask, and let me step back. Could I ask everyone to read the verse together with me? Right. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith,
who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God.
It speaks for itself. What are we being called to lay down? What are we being called to lay down? And spoiler alert, James and John, it looks like Christ is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So just a second. Sorry, I had to bring back to something. All right, that is everything for me. Thank you, ladies.